Hi, welcome to Midwest Magic Cleaning. My name is Guitar George. I know all the chords. And today we're working on a place that is going to give me the opportunity to talk about some things that I've wanted to talk about on this channel for ages. And let's start with explaining what's going on here. This is the culmination of ADHD and also some hoarding disorder. I would consider it to be mild hoarding disorder, but when those two disorders hook up, it can be a little bit difficult to deal with. Now, I'll get into a little bit more detail here in just a bit about what I'm talking about and how this manifests and where it comes from and all that. But as far as this area, this is what happens when you have the inability to truly organize something versus the idea that it's difficult to get rid of things. So let's start with hoarding disorder, because this is not what you're used to on the channel. Usually the people with this disorder on my channel are super like overloaded. There's so much dirt on the floor you could plant roses. But in this one, it's really clean. And for the most part, there's a lot of stuff in here that's keepable. She does have the space to store this. The problem is she's kind of at maximum capacity in this basement. And there's a lot of stuff that is not savable. There's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to be thrown away, but that's where the ADHD part comes in, and we'll get to that here in just a second. So you just hold up. Be patient, son. The level of hoarding disorder that she has, and I'm making an amateur diagnosis here. It's just that I've been around this for 300 cleanups. I've studied this since the early 1990s. It's just a subject I'm super familiar with. Anyway, the level of hoarding disorder that she has does run in her family. It does have a genetic component, and she does have multiple tragedies in her life that are very associated with hoarding disorder's manifestation. Now, the reason I call this mild is because she has the personality that I've ran into occasionally, where as long as they're not down there being a part of the cleanup, they're cool with me getting rid of pretty much whatever I want and making executive decisions. They'll give me a list of things that they want to keep, as well as things that they consider to be precious or valuable or whatever. And then they'll trust me to get rid of the things that genuinely are garbage or broken or dirty beyond repair or just not really a keepable item. It's just that if they were to come down there while I was cleaning and they start seeing things, the attachment kicks in and they're like, the possibility of the item overrides their desire to get the space back. And they'll be like, oh, I could use this for fill in the blank. I could make a quilt out of this, or I never know if I'm going to need this old paperwork, even though they haven't needed it for 10 years. There's just this overriding force that says, what if? Now, that does occasionally make it a bit complex for me when I'm cleaning up a place like this, because if I run into something that I am not quite sure about, it's better for me to err on the side of caution and just keep that item. But that's where we get into the ADHD part, and this is what I feel is the most interesting part of this video. Now, let me preface this part by saying that there are plenty of people out there who have ADHD who are hyper organized. Everything is exactly where it needs to be. They have baskets and storage units and everything that are perfectly organized and neat and tidy. In my experience, that is the exception and not the rule. For instance, the upstairs of her house, the main living area, is immaculate. Everything is organized, neat, tidy, put away. It's clean. I mean, even this basement is super clean. It's just that there's too much stuff. It's a matter of geometry. So you don't really see the severity of the ADHD until we start going through stuff, and then it becomes super obvious that it's there. And what I mean by that is that in most cases that I've personally dealt with, there's an attempt to organize and there's an attempt to make everything pretty and symmetrical. But when you get into those boxes and tubs, there is an organizational blindness that happens where you find all kinds of stuff that don't belong together, all just kind of shoved into the same box. So one of the things that she'll find precious in this basement that I need to look out for are photos, especially of her father who passed years ago, and it's a spot with her that I need to be very delicate with. There are old pictures of her kids. There's sonograms. I found the impression of her youngest kid's feet when he was a baby in plaster. But when I find those things, they're often shoved into boxes with just junk mail. And that's something I find a lot. This is not a dig on her. This is very, very common with ADHD and when they have organizational blindness. It's you can see them take out the tub. You can see where they have put the important stuff in. But then as they're cleaning up the mess, it's like, well, I've gotten all this stuff in. I'll just put all this extra stuff, this pile of old mail in here, and I'll go through it later. If you have ADHD, I would implore you to never take on that method ever. I would never, I sometimes will placate the person and say, okay, well, you got an overload of clothes. Let's tub those up and then you can go through them later. I know for a fact that's never going to happen. They, on a subconscious level, know that's never going to happen. The people who know them know that's never going to happen. If you can get them to just get rid of that stuff on the spot, you're in a much, much better position. Because let me tell you just a little bit of personal thing about her. It won't give away her identity or anything, but part of what makes her is her style and her sense of fashion. She's very aware of herself, and her style and her fashion is always unique to her. And I just can't imagine her ever waking up in the morning and saying, you know what I'm in the mood to wear today? Something from the basement. Something that I got tired of wearing a long time ago. It may be covered in mildew and need to be washed like 5 or 6 times, but I'm in the mood to wear that thing. Let me go root through all of my old clothes until I find that one thing. She would be so much better off if she just let me throw away literally all the clothes in the basement, because she's not going to access them again. If I were her, I would not donate them. I would not give them to family members. I would not try to sell them in a garage sale. I would throw them directly in the dumpster, because they are eventually bound for a landfill no matter what you think. It doesn't matter how many hands they go through. It doesn't matter if you make money off of them or not. It doesn't matter if you suddenly start wearing them again. Eventually, these things are going to land in a landfill, and the only thing you're doing is putting time between when they get there and when they don't. So you're basically turning your house into a temporary landfill. So you're basically being like, well, I instead of storing these over here in the trash where they belong, I'm going to make my house the dump. Anyway, back to the storage problem. And this is not a her thing. This is a thing that happens with pretty much every single household that has ADHD in it that I've ever helped. We will find important things shoved into just boxes full of random stuff. So I found pictures of her dad in one box, but it was shoved in between huge piles of old bills from like 2012, 2018 or whatever. Stuff that definitely does not need to be kept, but was just temporarily put in those boxes to be sorted through later. So the problem with me going through this is I literally have to look through every single piece of old mail, every piece of paperwork, every picture, every folder, and every file. And the reason is because you never know when you're going to open one up and in the middle of an old insurance policy paperwork or an old pamphlet from a seminar, there will just be a handful of old pictures. And so that's what I spent the most time doing in this basement, was going through paperwork. In the process of doing that, I started finding random money. So far, I think we're up to around $40 or $50 in just loose cash that was stashed in different boxes. I found cameras that had footage of her kids when they were toddlers that was just in a box that had random office supplies like tape that was no longer good, old ink pens that had dried up, a handful of old costume jewelry and stuff like that, all just kind of in one box. And again, this is not to fault the person. This is not making fun of them for this. This is a common thing that I find in almost all of these situations. So my job when I'm going through this is, number one, get rid of all the junk, all the pamphlets and all the mail I told you about earlier. We're going to get rid of all that. And I made probably 15 to 20 trash bags, and the trash bags are 40-gallon contractor bags entirely full of just junk, useless paperwork and old mail. I'm going to get rid of all that anything that's broken or has mildew or black mold on it, which there wasn't really a black mold problem down here, which is really strange for a basement. Normally that's where the black mold's going to happen. But there was a lot of mildew, a little bit of white mold that's harmless. But I'm going to get rid of all that stuff, and then I'm going to start temporarily sorting things into different tubs. So if I find out she likes beads, then I'm going to start a beads tub. If she likes outdoor decoration, I'm going to start an outdoor decoration tub. If she likes many, many pictures of me for some reason, I'm going to take hundreds of pictures of myself in different sexy poses and then store those in a tub for her to be surprised by later. I mean, she wanted me over there to help fix her basement problem, but I know what she really wants is pictures of me flexing in a French maid outfit. So she'll be surprised by that later. You're welcome. That'll be $7. At one point, I had a conversation with her about the common things that I find in homes that have ADHD like this. And it was so interesting that she's like, you should really bring that up on the video. So I'm going to talk about it a bit on here. It's just kind of weird things that you wouldn't expect, but I find it in literally all of the houses that I help, especially if they have ADHD. The first is really specific. It's a box or a bag of seashells and or jars of marbles. Also, either bags of sand or little jars of sand. I find them in every single house that I help out. And I think it's because they associate that with the memory of a trip. If they go to the beach, they're going to grab some sand, some shells or whatever. And they, instead of it being like a souvenir, it's more like a memory to mark an event. It's become such a running thing that I will keep my eye out for them whenever I'm helping out a new household. And as I'm going through stuff, when I find those, when I inevitably find them, I'll kind of laugh to myself and say, oh, there they are. Again, not making fun of the person, just it's a thing that pops up from time to time. Well, not time to time. It's a thing that pops up every time. Another thing I find a lot of are journals and or notebooks that have 3 to 5 pages written in and the rest of them are blank. But it's not just a couple, it's a lot. Like in this one, I think I found maybe 50 journals. Now, a lot of those I had to get rid of because they had white mold and stuff like that on them. But, and in fact, I ended up buying her a really nice leather-bound journal with one of the fanciest pens I've ever seen in my life, and told her that because these things are special, only write special things in this. And maybe that will help out with the whole journal thing. Because, like the thing with ADHD is there's a feeling you get when you get a new journal. It feels like a new beginning. That's when you're going to mark a change in your life. life because you're going to start writing down plans and doodles of houses that you'd like to build and just notes about how you're going to change yourself for the better and ways that you're going to plan to keep your house cleaner or your life more organized. And the thing is, you'll write the first 3 to 5 pages, but then you'll get to a point where you'll get motivated and you just get up and start doing it and no longer go back to the journal. But there's also the physical feeling of having brand new clean paper because that represents possibilities and it represents pure intent. And whenever you get a new pen, especially one that writes really well, it just feels good to write in a brand new notebook, and that smell it has and the feeling of, the ink pen going across those pages. That is a sensory thing that I think is associated with autism, but also can be associated with ADHD as well. But I find that a lot. I used to do that with drawing paper. I would get a brand new pad of drawing paper and instantly be motivated to draw in it. I've already talked about important stuff mixed up with random junk. That's every house. What's the other one? Oh, change everywhere, like money. You'll find them in random spots. So you'll find a little basket full of ink pens or office supplies or whatever that used to be on a desk. And whenever they got done shopping, whatever loose change they had in their pockets, they just throw in that little basket. Then if they happen to be in the kitchen and there's another little basket there, they would throw change in it. Well, eventually those little baskets get packed away and moved down to the basement and the change stays in them. So in this particular house, I found, I think it was $34 in actual paper money cash, and then another $10 to $20 in change, and I'm not even done cleaning the basement yet. So we found around $50, $40 to $50 in loose change and paper money, and we will likely find more. But that happens in a lot of houses too. But the loose change can add up really, really quickly. So you'll see me going through every purse, every pocketbook, every folder, because by the time we're done cleaning up a basement this big, it's not unheard of to find about $100 worth of cash. The other thing is I have never been in an ADHD cleanup that didn't have a massive problem with paperwork. So the problem that I run into when I'm going through a box of paperwork is that it's almost always filled with old bills, every birthday card they've ever gotten, pamphlets and junk mail, handbooks from old seminars, and like owner's manuals from appliances. And then, as was the example in one house that I've cleaned here on the channel, right in the middle of all that, the deed to 30 acres of land. So literally everything in the box is tossable except that one thing. And so you have to search through all of it in order to make sure you're not getting rid of something important like the deed to 30 acres of land. But where it becomes a problem is that that's not the problem in just one box. That's the problem in 50 boxes. The trash bags that I was taking up 2 flights of stairs and then into a dumpster in the backyard was that the lightest trash bag that I carried up was probably around 50 pounds. And then later in the video, you'll see me carrying up bigger trash bags that are heavier that I had to kind of sling over my back and use my legs to pick up because they were 100+ pounds each. Because paperwork is stupid heavy. But probably my favorite thing that I find in all these houses is ink pens. I don't know what it is, but in every household with ADHD, you find hundreds of ink pens everywhere. There will be little containers that are crammed full of old ink pens, old baskets that we thrown into boxes. So typically what I do when I find all that type of stuff, especially office supplies and stationery and ink pens, which you find a little bit of all that, I will get one small or medium-sized tub that's meant for just office supplies. I will keep the ink pens that are still in the package, get rid of everything else, and then keep some of the good office supplies like tape that's still usable, staplers, stationery that's not gross and mildewy. And I'll just make one sort of care package of office supplies that they can have them all in one spot. Everything else goes. Now, the big problem with most people who aren't used to doing a cleanup in an organization like this is not being able to recognize what they're just keeping an overload of that's just junk versus what are they keeping because they collect it. So, for instance, I've been in houses where they collected rocks, but instead of displaying their collection, which is what they should be doing, they just have them in a bunch of boxes and Ziploc bags. I'm obviously not going to throw those out because you can tell there was an intention there. There was a purpose to them collecting those sorts of things. And how do you figure out whether they just have an overload of pens or whether they just collect pens? Well, I think that you just have to use some common sense and either one, straight up ask them, which I in this case, I would rather not, because I'm afraid that she'll say, oh, I don't collect them, but I might have a use for them, so let's keep them. And I'm making an executive decision to not keep 250 to 500 ink pens that are likely just dry. But you can look at a handful of them, and if they have special things on them, or they look almost like they're novelty, or there's not just a handful of a bunch of Bics in there, it's got things like, I don't know, the St. Louis Zoo or whatever. You can look at that collection of stuff and see if there was a purpose or an intent. So, for instance, somebody who collects teaspoons, you'll find that they've got one for each state, or there's a different type of them, or they're all the same shape and size. There's a common sense difference between those things and just a box full of random silverware. My job as a cleaner and an organizer is being able to tell which is which. And I don't know, maybe that just takes practice. And if not, maybe it does just take you going to the person and saying, do you collect ink pens? And if they say no, it's like, okay, cool, that's all I needed to know. Then you come upstairs with a big handful of ink pens and just fling them at them. Because that's what you do with old ink pens. You're like, if you don't collect them, you're getting pelted by them. And that's it. That's where that ends. So let's talk about how this got this way. We talked a little bit earlier about the slight hoarding disorder that's there, the kind of manageable hoarding disorder that's there, but it has the potential to get out of hand very quick, which is why I'm glad she came to me and asked me for help. I think the biggest problem here is assigning purpose to rooms. I am a big advocate for every room in your house having a specific purpose. So when I'm helping people who have severe hoarding disorder, they often have ran out of room in their actual house, and the only place that they can function is their bedroom or a living room. So they'll have, say, a bedroom where they sleep, and also that's their office, and that's also where they watch TV, it's where they eat. And so the room has so many purposes that it loses meaning. So they start collecting things that that serves the purpose of that room. And since that room has 4, 5, 6 different purposes, they're going to collect computer parts and sheets and bedspreads and pillows. And they're also going to get a big pile of dirty dishes everywhere. And they'll have bags of chips all over the place because the purpose of that room is being filled by what it's intended for. So I've always been of the idea that a bedroom should just be a bedroom and nothing else. Maybe throw a TV in there for late nights when you're trying to wind down and get to sleep. But other than that, nothing else happens in that room. It's just a bedroom. The living room is an entertainment area where you've got your main TV. You may have video game systems, but that's to sit and relax and either talk to family members, gross, or, watch TV and just exist. The dining room should not also be your office. That's where you're going to eat. That's where you're going to, I don't know what people do in dining rooms. I don't really use a dining room. But personally, I turned a bedroom in my house into an office, so that's the only thing that happens in here is office work. I don't eat in here. I don't watch TV in here. I don't watch YouTube in here. I just do work. In her case, the basement's purpose was storage and nothing else. And that's fine. The problem is this basement is so big that geometry quickly becomes a problem. It gives her carte blanche to store literally everything down there because she has the room and the basement is meant for storage. However, she does want to turn this basement into a couple different studios to where we grid it off, and then one section of the basement becomes a section for her son who's really into stop animation and wants to get into claymation and videoing, so we could turn one quadrant of that basement into a studio specifically for him. She likes to do crafts and to paint and to sew and to create, and so another section of the basement can be roped off for that. So we can grid out that basement and change its purpose and give her one area, one even large area, because the basement is so huge, to say, this is your storage area. When this gets filled up, you're done. You can't put anything back in here. If something goes in, something else has to come out. So you still have storage area, but it's not the entire purpose of the entire basement. So what we're doing is what I talked about earlier. We're not assigning multiple purposes to the basement. We're actually gridding off the basement and changing it from a basement to a studio here and a craft section here and a storage section here. We're actually breaking the basement up into different pieces that have their own individual purposes that stay within those areas. So now when she has to store stuff, she's not storing it in the basement. She's storing it in the storage section of the basement. When she paints, she's going to the painting section of the basement. These each have their own purpose. But right now, since the whole thing is used for storage, it's very easy for her to just come downstairs with a box of random stuff, drop it on the floor, and then just walk away because that's what the basement's intended for. I can tell you that my house became a lot less chaotic whenever I designated my one room that was meant for breakdancing, posing, and flexing. So when I wanted to breakdance battle, we go into that room, and that's where we have it out. That's where someone gets served. But before then, I was posing, flexing, and breakdance battling over the course of my entire house, and it was just chaos. So I designated that one room for that one purpose, and suddenly my whole living situation changed. Now, the one thing to keep in mind is that I can never have total carte blanche to do whatever I want with a place like this, because if it were up to me, almost everything in this basement would have gone in the dumpster. I don't see a purpose for most of it, but I do see purpose in some of it. But of the things that I've gone through, the special precious items that she had that are sentimental can fit into about 3 tubs so far. I'm sure I'll find a lot more when I do the second half of this coming week. The useful items that are decorations and office supplies and paperwork that is important, things like that could fit into maybe 1 shelving unit. All the toys can be reused in a thing that she does like in her everyday life. So I get that. However, there was a big part of me that considered saying, if you throw all these toys away or you let me toss these in the dumpster, I'll donate like $1,000 worth of toys to the project that you work on. But it boils down to respect. I don't want to impose myself so much that I am taking over her space. There's some stuff that she wants to keep, even if I think that it's not in her best interest to keep it. Even if I think she'll never use it, you have to maintain respect, because if you go in and just ransack a place and throw everything away, that's not helping. That's just going into their house and just throwing away all their stuff. Like, that to me is not helping, that's imposing. So with every item that I pick up, there's a very quick subconscious decision that happens in my head. Is this broken? Does it have mold? Is it beyond repair? Is it garbage? Is it sentimental? Like, it'll be a Rolodex of those things going in my head. And if it needs to be thrown away, it gets thrown away. If I'm in doubt, I'm going to keep it. So for instance, you'll see me throwing away some books and some paperwork that was kind of iffy whenever I threw them away. Like, I could have kept them, I could have thrown them away, but they had foxing, or they were moldy, or they had ripped pages, or they've had water damage and they were all warped. So I want to err on, let's get rid of those because they're kind of ruined. There's a set of pink bed sheets and bedspread that I kind of wanted to keep for her because they were cool looking, but they were completely saturated in black mold. Anytime you store something in a basement, if anything in your house has black mold, that and the bathroom is going to be where it likely starts. Especially if it's touching the floor of a basement, that's where it's the most likely to get black mold. That's the only place, well, that and maybe 2 boxes I found some black mold on, and I just got rid of them and everything that was in them, because once you've got that, it's the spores are going to be everywhere. But other than that, I kept what I could. And the only thing I'm going to have some trouble with next week is there's so much clothing down there that's hers, and she wants to go through them. And here's the part. If she's watching this video, I want to implore you, if we keep them and you go through them, you have to go through them. In my experience, what happens is I will fold all this stuff up. I'll put all shirts with shirts, pants with pants, dresses with dresses, and then we'll tub them, put them away in a nice, neat, orderly stack of tubs. And then that's where they'll sit forever. If that's the case, if you know that that's likely what's going to happen, I wouldn't even bother donating them. I would put them straight out into the dumpster, because your sense of peace from gaining the space, which is more valuable than the stuff you're putting in the space, is more important than donating these to a shop that may or may not sell them. And most cases, whenever you donate stuff that's been in a basement to a charity shop, in most cases, they're not going to take them because they find small stains, or a button is missing off one of them, or it's got a little bit of mildew. And most people are like, well, they can just wash them and they'll be fine. But the people who run those charity shops aren't going to wash those. They need them in pristine condition so they can put them out on the floor. And I always bring this up whenever I'm doing a video like this, but if you've worked at a charity shop or a resale shop, please speak up and let people know the horrors of the things that you have to get rid of, because in most cases, every time somebody donates a whole big giant thing of clothes to one of those places, most of what they donate ends up going in the dumpster of the charity shop. And the person who's sorting through those clothes, you're just adding more work to their day, and you're taking up their dumpster space with your junk. If you've never had to work in that industry before, it'll probably shock you how much of the donations they have to throw away because they're not sellable. While I've got that on my brain, it seems like a tangent, but it's not. If you're storing stuff in a basement or garage, never use cardboard boxes. That's the very first thing that's going to develop mildew and black mold. It is a black mold magnet. So if you're storing things in a basement or a garage, I would use plastic tubs and make sure that it has a lid on it, because the things that are in that plastic tub will get ruined very quickly if it doesn't have a lid. But if you put stuff in a cardboard box, even if it's sealed, and you put it off in the corner and then you don't go down there for a year, it's almost guaranteed that the box and everything in it is ruined. Let's talk about the most important things that I find when clearing out a basement or a garage. And that is, how long do you keep the box that your expensive item came in? I've got a couple rules with that. If it is an important, expensive item that can be considered collectible, keep the box. So for instance, I collect cologne, and I've got some really high-end colognes that are made by Louis Vuitton and like Jazz Club and Spice Bomb and stuff like that. I will keep the boxes for those, because even after you're done with the cologne and it's all used up, collectors will buy the bottles and the boxes. And also scam people will buy them too, because they want to dupe the cologne and scam people into thinking they're buying real. So if I have a feeling that I'm selling to a scammer, I won't sell them the bottles. Anyway, the box is actually good for collecting. If you've got an expensive item like a TV, a computer, a household item like a Keurig, or anything like that that's expensive and it's an appliance of some sort, I typically keep the box for upwards of about a month. Anytime you have an electric item that goes bad, it almost always goes bad right away. If it hasn't gone bad within the first month, it likely isn't going to go bad. You can keep the warranty and all that stuff if you want. I personally don't. I don't even keep the handbooks or the owner's manuals. But after a month, it's totally fine to get rid of those boxes. I can't tell you how many places I've cleaned out where once we got rid of just the old boxes that stuff came in, it cleared out half of the basement or the garage space just getting rid of those things. Another thing is the electronics that you have. I got a new computer. What do I do with my old one? Well, if you haven't needed anything off of that old PC in a few months or even a year, just get rid of it. There's never going to be a point where you're going to hook that computer back at that old tower and pull stuff off of it, because typically you're going to pull everything you need off of it to begin with, pictures and videos and whatnot, the important stuff, and transfer those right away. If you get a new printer, just toss the old one. You are never going to have a situation where your new printer breaks down and then suddenly you have to revert back to the old one. Yes, that has happened before. It is also very rare. Printers are such crappy pieces of equipment that once you replace it with a new one, just throw away the old one. I have thrown away so many printers that are just obsolete and old and broken, or even if they're still functional, no one's ever going to use it again. You're not even sure if you can even get the old obsolete ink that went in those. Just get rid of the old printers, man. They deserve their fate. They deserve their burial. They've done what they needed to do, and it's time to let them rest now. CDs, VCR tapes, DVDs. If you're a collector, find a way to display them. If you've just got a bunch of old CDs, DVDs, and VCR tapes in a box, they're pointless. They're taking up space for no reason. Every movie and CD that's ever been printed can be found basically for free online. So if you're keeping them just to keep them, get rid of them, man. There's no reason to keep those. But if you're a collector, get a shelving unit and display them properly. That's my biggest thing. If you collect something, it's doing no good just sealed up in a box and hidden from view. Display your collection and be proud of it. Find some way to display those, even if it's just in a basement in a shelving unit. It's fine. I would prefer, if I've got a collection, for that collection to be displayed in the open as a feature of your house. To me, displaying a collection is honoring it. Keeping a collection sealed up and hidden out of sight is hoarding it. For me personally, I collect shoes. It's not overboard. I've got like 35 or 40 pairs of shoes. I'm not so overloaded that I would say it's a problem, but I display my shoes. I have shoe racks that I have in my house that display everything to where, one, I wear the shoes, so there's an actual function, but when I'm not wearing them, they're a part of the decoration of my house. Then sometimes I'll feel a little frisky and I'll wear all 35 pairs at once. That's why they call me Shoe Body Johnny. We're going to come back to this house this coming week, and we're going to do the second half of the basement. This was such a huge project that I spent a week there. Now, I only spent about 3 hours per day here because this is exhausting, but it took me most of a week to get this first half done. And what you're going to notice is that all the extra stuff that I didn't throw away or I didn't box up yet got pushed to the second half of the basement. And that is so that, one, I can get some good after shots, to be honest. But two, it's because I want this section of the basement that I cleaned to be as totally done as possible. Then whenever I start the second half, I can move things into that as a staging area or a temporary holding area. So you're always going to make a much bigger mess whenever you're cluttering or you're decluttering and you're organizing something like this, as opposed to when you're done. It's always going to get worse before it gets better. So when I start on this second half next week, or this coming week, then I'm going to start sliding things back into the newly cleaned area, use that as a sorting ground, and then slowly start putting things away in the second half. That is something I think a lot of people are afraid of. They're like, man, I started to organize my kitchen, but I made it so much worse than it actually is. Don't worry, don't freak out. That's a part of the process. It happens, and it's supposed to happen. You have to clear area in order to organize an area. And that means putting stuff on the floor, putting stuff on areas that you just cleaned. It's totally normal. So shut up. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button. We are working our way toward 1 million subscribers, and whenever I get that milestone, I will never ask for a subscription again because we get a gold plaque at 1 million subscribers. We already have the silver one at 100,000, but the gold plaque is what I really want out of the channel. I do all these cleanings for free, and the only thing I've ever asked in return was the gold plaque, and we're so close to getting it now. So please hit the subscribe button. If you're into supporting the channel in a more monetary way and you want extra videos and live streams and access to me via Discord, there's a paid membership. Please do not do the paid membership if you can't afford it. But if you can afford it, there's 3 tiers. The top tier is just for people who have the extra money and want to support the channel in a more hardcore way. But the first tier gets access to Discord. The second tier gets access to Discord and an extra video every week, usually in the form of a live stream and hangouts. But if you ever wanted to talk to me directly, Discord is the place to do it. I hang out on there all the time, even if it's just me pointing the camera at myself and hanging out and body doubling with people while I play video games. We're all juvenile delinquents, even though most of us are like my age, like 50. Actually, the age range is like from 20 up to, I think we've got people in their 70s who hang out and just BS with each other. It's a lot of fun. I've made lifelong friends in there, and it's a great place to be. But again, if you cannot afford it, do not buy a membership. I don't want you spending money that you don't have on something you don't need. That's ridiculous. All that being said, members, I will see you this Wednesday. Everybody else, I'll see you next weekend. Later.